Question of the day. What is life about? What is the meaning of life? Is there any justification for asking the question, what is the meaning of life? What is the reason for life? What is the basis of life? It's an interesting question in itself, and yet our consciousness tells us that there is an awareness of an existence and a relationship of that existential plane to everything else, of which we know very little. We don't really know very much about anything, actually. There was an individual who said that he doesn't believe in God. He's a scientist. And he said, the universe is finite. And then the next question came to him, what's outside of it? If there's a boundary condition to the finitude of our universe. And his answer was nothing. But the fact of the matter is there is no such thing as nothing. There is no such thing as emptiness or the void or the vacuum, because everything is contingent upon the existential reality of everything else. And in spite of the fact that the causal nexus of natural phenomena involves the communication of motion through touch, push and pull, nevertheless, there are force carriers that connect one thing to another through space, through what we perceive as empty space. But there is no such thing as empty space. Quantum vacuum is filled with an infinite sea of energy. There was a time when scientists considered emptiness the luminescence field, or luminescence ether. That is, there had to be some substrate to propagate light. After all, light is a quantum. It's a corpuscle, even at the same time that it's a wave. But a wave is simply a collection of particles that are moving in relative translational motion with respect to one another. They're just very small, so we don't perceive them as substantial material aggregates. Yet the effects of a wave are felt because pressure can only be produced by energy, which is in fact matter. So the idea that the universe is finite, that man is finite, and cosmologists appear to be saying that everything in the universe is chaotic. And they get titillated. They get really excited when they speak about supernovae and explosions of stars and black holes, pulsars, quasars, neutron stars. They get excited. But these are just particles in their own right, communicating via force carriers with other particles, regardless of the size of the particles. There are different levels of structure, macroscopic, mesoscopic, microscopic. And, star systems are macroscopic, man is mesoscopic, and, of course, viruses are microscopic. But the same processes that regulate the structure and function of each level apparently function according to the same rules, the same laws, the same natural processes that operate on any particular level. Recent studies at the University of Oklahoma have pointed to the idea that unicellular animals, when put into an inhospitable environment, produce replicates adjacent to the original organism, which appears to be undergoing apoptosis, cell death. And then exposed to a magnetic field, that is a milligauss magnetic field, these replicates can disappear, move back to the organism, and the organism revived by replacing the inhospitable environment with a hospitable environment. This is analogous to someone experiencing a near-death event where they appear to be moving through a tunnel wherein the light is at the end, but they never get to the end of the tunnel because they come back and they wake up. People have described this experience universally, as a matter of fact. This is analogous to what we see on a microscopic level. There really is not much of a differential between the different levels of structure and function. For example, there's 37.2 trillion cells in a body, or approximately that number. And we wonder about the number of stars in a galaxy, the number of galaxies in the universe, as a matter of fact. Perhaps there are 100 billion stars in a galaxy. And of course, there are galactic clusters. So you may very well have trillions of stars in a galactic cluster. Now, we don't necessarily want to anthropomorphize the cluster of galaxies, but the analogy may very well hold true. Our level of perception cannot identify a galactic cluster as a living organism. Certainly it can't identify the universe as a living organism. Organized religion has very often anthropomorphized the conception of God. That is, the creative force that produces the order that we perceive in the universe. Because in spite of whatever the cosmologists tell us about the chaos and the violence of the universe, there is no doubt an order. The fact that we can perceive the chaos means that the chaos produces order. The fact that we are self-aware means that our consciousness has a relevance. See, everything is always communicating. There's somebody on the other end of the phone. They want something. They want to communicate something. We don't necessarily need to receive it, But if we don't receive it, that communication is still disseminated in other ways. No matter what happens in the universe, anywhere in the universe, it will no doubt affect not only the local environment, but it will affect the entire universe. That's why organized religion, especially the church fathers, thought that mankind, humankind, if you will, was the center of the universe. That the focus of the universe was identified as a man. And when I say man, that's not a gender specific. That is a global representation, including women, including children, including everyone. Not only including human beings, Homo sapiens, it includes animals, not only mammals, it includes other living forms. There are millions of species of algae alone, plants, so many different species of plants. These are living things. We ask, what is life? What is life relative to inanimate objects? Well, life is based upon a collection of intrinsic motions that are relative to the totality of the environment. As a matter of fact, relative to universal causation. The Earth is a large magnet. The Earth is spinning around gyroscopically. It's contained within a vortex that appears to be connected to other states of reality. There was a time when scientists thought that the planets were whirling about the sun as though caught in a liquid vortex. At any rate, the Earth is spinning around, rotating at about 1,000 miles an hour, and it's caught up in its orbit around the sun, traveling at about 18.5 miles per second, nutating or bobbing up and down, with shifting axis as well. The orientation of the Earth relative to the sun, regulating to a great extent the climate on Earth, among other things, of course. The activity in the photosphere of the sun is greatly influential to the climate on the Earth. The orientation of the different planets and star systems and gravitational effects, not only in the local solar system, but in the star systems, affect everything. Because gravity proceeds from masses, and the masses communicate across the void. And since there is no void, that is, the void is filled with matter, all bodies, large and small, communicate with all other bodies, large and small. So we certainly are affected by Venus or Mars or Jupiter. To a large extent, the positions of the planets in space-time, the positions of the stars in space-time, the positions of everything in the universe, within the context of the boundary of the universe, the finitude, affects everything else. Now we think about Lorentz forces. The Lorentz force is orthogonal to the charge vector, that is a charge moving in a particular direction, electric charge, at right angles to the magnetic field, the geomagnetic field. There is also a magnetic field permeating outer space, ranging from, at a distance from the sun, about 10 to the minus 7 Gauss to 10 to the minus 14 Gauss, approximately. And most magnetic flux densities within nebulae range from 10 to the minus 11 Gauss to 10 to the minus 14 Gauss, such that there are hydrogen atoms and dust particles contained in this chemical cloud of interstellar substance, which is also affected by cosmic rays, which are composed by free protons, alpha particles, free electrons, and so on, interacting with the hydrogen such that over millions of years, the hydrogen may fuse, ultimately produce protostars when the temperature becomes about 10 million degrees Fahrenheit. Now, the point being that as creatures crawled upon the earth, and the earth revolved counterclockwise, there was a Lorentz force produced as a consequence of the magnetic field and the moving electric charges that was orthogonal, or vertical to the surface of the earth, thus evolving Homo erectus. In other words, man became erect as a consequence of electromagnetic interactions. And of course, electromagnetism and gravity are different manifestations of the same essential substrate, that is, Leibnizian monad, the ultimately small, elemental, universal, global particles that comprise even the subatomic particles of electrons, protons, and predominantly in terms of protons, the Leibnizian monads comprise quarks, the up and down, the strange and charmed, and the bottom and top, and the bosons, the force carriers, whether Higgs boson or other forms, gravitons, spin 2 bosons, or even dark energy particulate masses, which appear to be producing negative pressure waves within the quantum vacuum. And all these particles that comprise other states of reality affect the external four-dimensional manifold, that is ordinary matter, us. So we're affected, our lives are affected by the magnetic field of the earth, by the magnetic activity on the surface of the sun, by the gravitational interactions of all the heavenly bodies, affected by the magnetic fields permeating outer space, the cosmic rays that are emanating from solar masses. We're affected by everything. And Schumann resonances that is electrical activity in the ionosphere at particular frequencies, have promulgated the evolvement of organisms on the earth, such that we have not only our bodies moving with the earth, hurtling through space, but within the context of our organisms, within the context of our bodies, we have particles that are moving incessantly to maintain the flux of life. Our blood and its components, the lymph and its components, charged species moving to different rhythms, circadian rhythms, light quanta having frequencies in various spectra, understanding that proteins are vibrating at about 10 to the 12 hertz, whereas nucleotides, DNA, is vibrating at about 10 to the 11 hertz. Normal light vibrates a little bit faster, 10 to the 14, 10 to the 15 hertz. And hydrogen bonds provide electromagnetic oscillations that regulate the lengths of the bonds, the stretching of the bonds, like harps. And we note that Franco Bistolfi talked about hydrogen harps creating the music of life, the song of life. So that we have various particles inside our bodies incessantly moving, changing their flux according to also changing environments beyond the extension of our bodies, beyond the border of our bodies. In much the same way that the universe is bounded, and we wonder what's outside of our universe. Can't say there's nothing outside of our universe. Man's experience tells him that no matter what he's looking at, no matter what he's considering, no matter what he's conceiving, there's always something outside of that finitude, because we are still capable of conceiving infinity. We don't really know what it means, because the idea that actuality extends infinitely is beyond man's comprehension. If there's something outside of our universe, the multiverse, the cosmos, what's outside of that? We can't even conceive the answer to a question like that. When we ask what comprises quarks and electrons, so-called fundamental particles, we can't even conceive the infinite divisibility of such particles, because we're not familiar with that divisibility. So that we wonder that the natural essence of life, in terms of consciousness, which must be matter in motion, extending from the external field, that is ordinary matter, to other states of reality. We could call them supernatural if we want to get mystical, but they're not really supernatural. They are natural. They're just extensions to levels of structure and function that man is simply not privy to. So, the complex array of motions of particles within the framework of our global structures, our bodies, propitiates the flux of life and aids in the awareness of self. Does it control self-awareness? In other words, is consciousness simply a product of brain function? It's difficult to comprehend that self-awareness is derived from physical processes, like a computer. It just doesn't appear to be that simple. It's true that piezoelectricity, that is the conversion of electromagnetic oscillations to mechanical vibrations and vice versa, basically regulates the interactivity between atoms and molecules. And piezoelectricity is probably, I believe, definitely an elemental nature of all matter. Because all matter is condensed electromagnetic field. Ultimately, all matter is comprised of elementary electric charges. Electricity or electric charges being thought of as simply particles in motion, spinning a certain way, if you will. And a variation of charge depends upon the orientation or the spin axes, the inertial moments, and spin angular momentum of particles. That's what regulates charge. So charge is it's a relative perception based upon the motions of particles with respect to a particular coordinate system chosen consistently. So, really, what is life? It's not simply a complex array of pieces of matter moving around in some ordered pattern based upon a singular level of structure and function, that is the external manifold. That can't be the answer. Life is based upon an extension of special matter that moves from one source to another. That is, the consciousness has the ability to leave our bodies, our brains, if you will. If you ever meditated and move into satyagraha, introspection, and then extend that to pratyahara, satyagraha is the truth force, extending to pratyahara and leading to samadhi, which is ecstasy, with total oblivion to physical reality, the physical reality that we perceive ostensibly. But in between those states, in the truth force, there is something that extends beyond simple corporeal matter, the corpus of our body. The corpus is the body of our manifold, of our four-dimensional manifold. There's something that extends beyond that, the consciousness. The consciousness is it's not simply self-awareness. Because when we think about ourselves, we might just think about our bodies. So it's not just self-awareness in terms of physical substrate. Physical meaning ordinary matter. The consciousness must extend to extraordinary matter, other states of reality, through dark energy. Not necessitating that dark energy is relevant only in terms of the expansion of the universe. No, what we're talking about dark energy, we're talking about matter in motion that is outside of the external field, that is intrinsic to the void, intrinsic to what we call the void, that is, intrinsic to space, which is filled with matter and energy. Remember that matter and energy are one and the same thing. E equals mc squared. Light being a connection between levels of structure and function, between levels of reality. The background microwave radiation coming from other states of reality, coming from the quantum vacuum, coming from the luminescence field, coming from the void, not necessarily coming from, an original Big Bang. That's an assumption. That's ad hoc. It may be true, but it may not be true. We don't know the answer to that. In spite of the fact that scientists believe that, they've been able to predict the relative composition of the universe, especially in terms of the hydrogen and helium and so on, and the fact that it's coming from all parts of space tells them that it's from the original Big Bang. But the fact of the matter is that all parts of space are connected to other states of reality, that is the quantum vacuum, the essential material of the quantum vacuum, which could very well produce virtual excitations that are viewed as this microwave background radiation. Therefore, the discovery of the microwave background radiation, the idea that we can predict how much hydrogen is in the universe, etc., we can't assume that proves the reality of the Big Bang. As a matter of fact, we're still stuck with the steady state and the Big Bang as two hypotheses that may not be irreconcilable. They may correspond. As a matter of fact, if you have a wormhole that produces a universe from the void, and that universe is our universe, and of course there are so many different universes, that doesn't mean that the steady state is wrong. It just means that there are different interactions that occur throughout space-time that may represent connections between the reality we're accustomed to perceiving and other states of reality, other states of matter that are actual. and interactive. In other words, as an example, there has been more discussion about UFOs lately, unidentified flying objects, and the wonder about, what are these objects? Where do they come from? Are they from different star systems? I would propose the proposition, at least, that they come from different states of reality. That is, they are craft that have moved through wormholes to this state of reality from other states of reality that are indeed, to use a common term, parallel universes. That is, they exist right here. Right here. They don't have to be, 4 light years away to Alpha Centauri or Proxima Centauri or other star systems. They could be coming from right here, from the void. They come from the void. They disappear. They disappear on a dime. And it could be that other intelligent life has been able to move from one state of reality to another through wormholes, through, you could say, singularities. To us, physics breaks down, but it doesn't really break down. It's just not understood by us. So let me propose this possibility in terms of science. If you have a body that's comprised of atoms, all bodies are comprised of atoms, and the atoms are comprised of subatomic particles, and the subatomic particles are comprised of elemental structures, the tiniest of structures. We'll call them, for argument's sake, monads, Leibnizian monads, or the smallest particles that we can conceive. Using the equation of Jacobson resonance and plugging in the masses of these particles into mc squared, the left side of the equation, we can establish the intrinsic energy of these particles and then calculate the magnetic fields that would be necessary to vibrate them out of their inertial state. If you take the elemental particles out of their inertial state relative to coordinate system chosen consistently, for example, or you take them out of their relative translational state with respect to particles that exist concomitantly with us, with ordinary matter, they would disappear. They would have to disappear because their inertial state would change. If their inertial state changes, they would disappear. They would still be in existence. They would still exist, but they would be invisible to us. But that doesn't mean they would be invisible to some other realm of perception. But they would be invisible to us. If you take a UFO, which doesn't have any particular mechanism to fly, except we would denote that they would have to be capable of fusion, thermonuclear fusion power, to use ordinary water as their source of energy. And they would be able to regulate the vibrational state of their craft relative to the electromagnetic environment that they're in, and they could change their inertial state at will simply by changing the magnetic field, which regulates the intrinsic structure and function of the craft. So if they're producing energy, and that energy can produce magnetic fields, and of course the energy itself is produced via a magnetic field using, let's say, water as their source of energy, understanding that a very small amount of water produces an enormous amount of energy. I mean, 1 gram of protons can produce 190,000 kilowatt hours of electrical energy in our realm. So if these crafts are regulated by the electromagnetic field and propagated by energy derived from fusion power, they wouldn't need fuel to burn to move. They would be able to change their position, their location in space-time instantly, just as particle jumps. Remembering that, for example, genes don't occupy stable loci. They jump from one place to another instantly, depending upon the electromagnetic environment. It's the same thing with these crafts. They could control their electromagnetic environment relative to other producers of environmental conditions and instantly induce particle jumps as well as disappear by changing their inertial states of the micro constituents of the craft. So the UFOs don't necessarily come from other star systems through strange wormholes. They could very well come from other states of reality right here. And that helps us understand that the projection of consciousness outside of the body is certainly feasible, because the consciousness would be comprised of not simply elementary electric charges, not simply of electromagnetic fields, but it would be comprised of the most fundamental particles, the essence of material. That is the Leibnizian monads, which are bosonic and fermionic simultaneously, and can move from one state of reality to another instantly. You can imagine that you're flying in outer space instantly. You don't have to take off. Just imagine that all of a sudden you close your eyes and you're flying in outer space. You're leaving the solar system. You're investigating other star systems. We can do that with our minds, with our consciousnesses. Our brains don't go there. Our consciousness goes there, because consciousness is the most elemental structure that's associated with our corpus, our body, our brain, but it isn't just the brain. Let's just say that the brain is a house for our consciousness. But our consciousness doesn't only occupy the brain. It can go anywhere, at any time, instantly. It can fly through space. It can change its inertial state. It can leave this external manifold. It can go into other states of reality. It can go into the extraordinary that some might call the supernatural. I don't adhere to that term. To me, it's just this state of reality and other states of reality and connections thereto. So if you let your mind wander, if you let your consciousness free, if you let your soul open to all possibilities, you can go anywhere, you can be anything, you can do anything. The potentialities are unlimited, in spite of the fact that we don't yet understand what that infinite extension is. But that's the strange thing about humans. We're capable of conceiving such possibilities that we can leave this world, that we can even find peace and harmony and order. And ultimately, subject ourselves to God's will, because that's our ultimate purpose. That's the meaning of life. That's the significance and reason that we're alive. Faith